The IDF just completed an amazing operation to rescue 4 Israeli hostages. Mati, this was like something from the movies. I don't think Israel did this since the Entebbe operation.
Yair, this has been one of the most exciting weeks for me personally, I think for people in Israel, in a very long time. It was a big win when we really need it.
Yeah, definitely. It's a boost of morale. It's like an example to show our military capabilities in the heart of the Gaza Strip, surrounded by terrorists that were firing rockets, RPGs, and AK-47s at our troops. The IDF, special forces, including police units and the Air Force, were able to extract 4 Israeli hostages from 2 different locations. We'll go into the details of what happened step by step. And the most important thing, the hostages are back home, and the country is like breathing a little bit easier because of that, and there is hope.
So today we're telling the incredible story of Operation Arnon, the unbelievable, impressive, professional story of how the IDF, with pretty much every Special Forces unit,
Definitely.
And the Air Force,
and the tanks unit,
and tanks,
so
and infantry,
to our units,
pulled out hostages from the heart of Gaza, where the terrorists were waiting for them in broad daylight. Pulled them out alive against all the odds. I mean, we've seen the footage. It is an incredible operation.
Yeah, and it didn't go smoothly, by the way. There were troubles along the way. We're going to break it down minute by minute, but let's just open by introducing the one and only Mati Shoshani.
And the one and only Yair Pinto.
Thank you. And this is TBN Israel, the podcast. So this is a place where we talk and dive deep into the news, basically. So we heard about this news, but let's break it down, understand really what happened in this crazy operation.
Let's start with how we got here. So we've been at war with Gaza and to a lesser degree with Hezbollah since October 7th.
Yeah.
And on October 7th, several hundred Israeli citizens and soldiers were kidnapped by Hamas and by non-Hamas terrorists from Gaza.
All civilians that just joined into the party.
Joined into the mayhem, pulled and kidnapped into the Gaza Strip. Since that time, several of them have been rescued by the IDF. Several dozen, have been exchanged in the first deal we had with the Hamas. Several have been found to be dead in communities around the Gaza Strip after the fact.
Yeah.
And quite a few, over 100 of them to date, remain alive and in Hamas captivity inside the Gaza Strip.
Yeah, somewhere inside the Gaza Strip, underneath the ground, in terror tunnels, or in houses of civilians or Hamas affiliates.
Exactly. And these people are hidden away. Some of them are held in a tunnel underground, guarded by Hamas combatants. Some of them are held by families working together with Hamas terrorists inside houses, and they've been moved from one place to another throughout the war. We've heard this from hostages that have been freed previously, that many of them, 1, didn't know where they were, 2, were sort of moved repeatedly.
Yeah.
Sometimes they were in a group, sometimes they were alone, sometimes they were rejoined with a different group. They were continuously moved. So on an intelligence level, our security apparatus had to deal with the fact that there are hostages, and they've probably known about multiple of these hostages, who are constantly being moved. Yeah. Not only these hostages are guarded by multiple armed guards, not only they're often guarded inside a community, a compound of a family, a compound of a clan, a compound of like a neighborhood. This specific case, these people were inside a very busy market.
Yes.
A market in the middle of the day where there were, according to multiple reports that have come out, hundreds of armed terrorists amongst thousands of civilians.
Which is how Hamas operates in this war, from within the heavily densely populated of civilians. So they always surround themselves with civilians. So in case of conflict with the IDF, there'll be many civilian casualties. And then what will happen is what we see now in the news, is that the international media is twisting it against Israel, saying that Israel harm the civilian population.
It's a crazy statement.
Yeah.
It's like, Yair, why do you harm the civilians who are supporting the kidnapping of innocent civilians when we were forced to use force to rescue them? It's such a weird roundabout conversation. It's like as if I would kidnap your child and then be angry that someone else was hurt while you were trying to rescue your child.
Exactly.
Which is exactly what happened.
Yeah. And by the way, these hostages, like Noa, she told the Israeli press when she was released that once every, I don't know if it's few days or few weeks, she was taken outside of the house that she was kept, dressed as an Arab lady, Muslim lady, so that nobody will see her, so she can, walk around. And that's how also they moved her from place to place.
Yeah. So let's talk about who these people were. Let's sort of lay the foundations to the facts of this story. Mm-hmm. So there are 4 hostages that were freed. All of them are alive and well. Noa Argamani, who's 26. Noa Argamani is one of the best known,
most famous
videos from October 7th, because she's seen sort of kidnapped by a bunch of Hamas terrorists on the back of a motorcycle
from the Nova party.
From the Nova party,
yeah.
And she's seen teary-eyed, sort of reaching out her arms,
she's reaching out saying, no.
and sort of dragged and violently sort of like carried away. It's images that I think most people that have seen any footage from October 7th have seen her.
Yes, definitely.
Shlomi Ziv, who was 41, Almog Meir Jan, who's 22 years old, and Andrey Kozlov, who's 27. Andrey is the new immigrant, if I remember correctly.
Yes, and also Hamas released a video of him, like an edited video as part of their psychological warfare recently.
Yeah.
So that's actually pretty encouraging to see him being released.
And they were held, just to finish, they were held in 2 separate places. 3 men held in one apartment where they've been, from what I understood, most of the war.
8 months. Imagine that.
8 months in a very, very small confined space, living right above a family of Palestinians who knew they were there, and they say that they, during their captivity, several times were allowed while the family was out to go and cook in the family's kitchen. So it's a family living downstairs with hostages living above them, with several Hamas terrorists guarding the hostages.
Sounds pretty normal, huh? You have having hostages in your house with your kids and your family members.
Yeah. And then several buildings away, a couple hundred yards away, is Noa Argamani in another apartment.
Yeah.
Noa had been moved several times during the war between different places, but for at least several months, I'm not sure how many, she was living in that same apartment. And they are in the most crowded area of a very, very, very crowded refugee camp inside the Gaza Strip, in a market.
Yeah, in the center of the Gaza Strip, just so you understand it geographically. Yeah. Okay, we can put a map for those of you who watch this podcast and not just listen to it. Yeah. But let's go minute by minute. Okay, so at around 11 in the morning, the Israeli War Cabinet gave the green light to launch this operation. Mm-hmm. Okay, so before that, of course, the IDF's intelligence and other intelligence branches like the Shin Bet and police units gathered the intelligence about the whereabouts of the Israeli hostages and decided to launch this operation. And in order to do it, they had to initiate the operation for 2 teams at the same time.
Yes.
Okay, why do you do it at the same time? Because you don't want one, hostage location to think, okay, so if they got to the other location, it's time for us to move, hide, or just kill the hostages at spot. So you have to do it at the same time with exact precision in order to be successful and rescue both locations together.
Well, you're jumping, you're saying, so we're starting at 11 a.m.
Yeah.
The forces didn't just show up there at 11 a.m. And I want to sort of dive into what it takes for military units, definitely at this scale,
to get to this level of operation.
To get to this level of operation. So we're describing in the heart of hostile civilian population, in the heart of a hostile region that is at war with Israel at that time. There are thousands of armed civilians, thousands of terrorists around these people. The IDF inserts, I don't know how many, dozens or hundreds of civilian dressed soldiers from elite units that are around the houses where the captives are held.
Yeah.
The hostages are held. They've inserted countless armored units throughout the area. They've started maneuvering several sort of misleading actions in other parts of the Gaza Strip to pull away.
To divert the attention of Hamas to other locations.
Exactly, several acts of diversion. And all that, even before this day, think special forces, when they're training for this kind of operation, they're modeling these attacks to the T.
Yeah, to the window, to everything, to the window, to the door. Basically, they built a model of the market and of these buildings in Israel, trained before they entered the Gaza Strip.
I think this is sort of interesting to go into the mind of the soldiers on the ground. Special forces, what really differentiates special forces from the regular army in most armies is the level of training on one hand, but two, the specificity of the operation and the time they have to prepare for it. And I'll explain. Infantry units, and we've both, even though we're both from tank units, we've both done infantry operations. When you have an objective, you usually have a couple hours to train for it, maybe a day. To train, you model it quickly. You look at the maps, you look at the aerials.
You do scenario. What happens if the terrorist will shoot from this window? What happens if reinforcements? What happens if civilians will come? So you know how to act.
And it's sort of, it's enough. So like you know the area, you know how to navigate to it, you know how to navigate away from it, things like that. It's not enough, and this is important to state, it's not enough if you're trying to do something like this. And that's where sort of the special forces are different than the regular army. The special forces, and definitely when it's not in the middle of a war, have weeks or months to model these type of activities.
Yeah.
And by model these activities, what does that mean? They build to scale the houses, the doors, the windows, the staircases, everything. They run scenarios on where the guards could be, the angles of vision to the houses on the street.
They learn the faces of the family that live in this building, the faces of the potential Hamas terrorists that operate in these neighborhoods.
Yes.
They learn their stories. How long are they with the organization? I think that's the difference between them and the normal army.
Yeah, and so in this case, we're talking about multiple special forces unit being inserted in civilian clothing into a very hostile area. They've trained rigorously for this. And what's amazing is that I imagine, I don't know if this is a fact, we've had intelligence on different hostages. The problem is you have to have that intelligence for long enough to know that they're there, to prepare, and then to execute.
And to make sure they're still there when you're executing, then it's not
Because if you move them even just one building over, you have to sort of remodel the whole thing.
Everything changes, yeah.
And so, again, so then we arrive at 11 a.m. Everyone's trained, everyone's modeled it, everyone's rehearsed again and again and again. All the forces are there. They have everything sort of divvied out between the different units.
The other forces already started to create a diversion in a different location in the Gaza Strip.
And at that moment, in a command room somewhere unknown in Israel, our Prime Minister, our Chief of Staff, and several other high-ranking officers are able to sort of push the green light, so to speak, give the green light for the operation to kick off.
Yeah, one thing that is very important to mention is that the IDF, and especially we've seen it in this war, is operating hand in hand with other units that are not necessarily military even. Like, okay, so we operate together with the Air Force very well. We operate with the Navy, but we also operate with police forces, special police forces that are kind of similar to SWAT teams. SWAT teams, and other units that are not part of the IDF, which makes this operation more capable, more successful, but also more hard to coordinate. I mean, because different branches.
And so at 11 a.m. they get the green light, and this beautifully coordinated event sort of starts unfolding. And multiple forces at the same time storm from plain sight, essentially, storm into these houses where two groups of captives are held. Again, Noah and then the three other men. And within minutes, they've already overtaken the entire building in which they were held and pulled these people out.
But this happened under very heavy fire.
Yeah, then the difficult part happens.
Yeah.
So as long as you have the element of surprise, you sort of got an advantage on your enemy. Now they know you're there. They've heard the gunshots. They've seen the assets, the tanks, the APCs, the helicopters hovering above. Now they know something's happening. And again, densely populated, full of terrorists from every angle, and they start swarming the area. And
terrorists start just to shoot towards every direction. They don't care if they hurt their own civilians or not. That's the difference. And they just opened fire with RPGs towards the direction that they thought that the soldiers were in. And that's why you have so many casualties in this area.
So you have indiscriminately, for quite some time, again, this is countless, hundreds of armed Hamas terrorists swarm the area, and they're firing at everything they see.
Yeah.
They fire at every military vehicle, everything they think is a military vehicle. They're firing at the helicopters in the air. They're firing into the buildings where the hostages with the forces that extracted them are.
Yeah.
And under those circumstances, with RPGs flying and bullets just like whistling through the air, under those very, very rough circumstances, our special forces and our army are able to extract all these hostages without any of them getting hurt.
Yeah, but it wasn't easy.
It wasn't easy. Testament to that is the fact that a leader of one of the special forces squads, after which the
whole operation,
his name is Arnon. He's a I don't know what exactly his rank is, but Arnon is a leader, a commander. Arnon Zmora, rest in peace, was killed apparently upon the moment of breach into one of the buildings. This is a man who's, again, just to understand the skill level of these units, this is a man for several decades, essentially since his late teens until now, has been fighting in a counterterrorism unit. Highly skilled, highly trained, highly experienced.
Highly appreciated by his soldiers. He has a wife and 2 kids that he left back in Israel. And so they entered, they extracted the kidnapped Israelis, and then they brought them into a vehicle. And then one of the units waited for the other unit to come and enter this vehicle, and then the vehicle got stuck.
Yeah.
Right. This is one of the reports that I heard about.
Let's imagine the scene. This isn't, if you're thinking that it's like 5 guys, like you see in like a low budget film, 5 guys firing on the forces.
Yeah.
Hamas numbers are hundreds of casualties. IDF numbers say at over 100 armed terrorists killed. So that doesn't mean there were 100 terrorists. There means 100 killed. Hundreds of terrorists firing with every weapon they have in a very small area. So
in a market.
Within a market.
Yeah.
So these soldiers are pulling out the hostages, who again are sort of these pale, weak individuals who've been in captivity for 8 months at this point. They're pulling them out into a firestorm. They pull them into the vehicles. First vehicle takes a rocket. It can't move. They bring another vehicle, a backup vehicle.
The gear gets stuck.
Same happens. It breaks down, and so on and so forth till eventually. And again, this is multiple people who are risking their life. Multiple people whose lives are on the cusp of losing them to free these civilians, and they eventually extract them all on helicopters out of the Gaza Strip and back into Israel.
Yeah.
They leave behind a very large, for this period in the war, contingency of soldiers who continue fighting against the very large number of terrorists who are fighting them.
That were now uncovered.
Again, more than 100 terrorists killed in the gunfight that takes place here. No other IDF soldiers, aside from Arnon Zmora, who was killed in the beginning of this fight, but well over 100 terrorists are killed, countless more injured. Just an enormous firefight that involves Air Force and tanks and infantry and
Navy,
special forces, Navy shelling the houses. I mean, the level of firepower that was required is enormous.
Yeah, once Hamas knew that the Israelis had the hostages with them and they're trying to extract them out of the Gaza Strip, they basically sent in everything that they had. Okay, so the IDF, in order to protect the special unit forces, had to respond and create basically a ring of fire around them to cover them all the way until the extraction point, until the helicopter, basically.
Yeah. If you've ever seen Black Hawk Down,
I'm sure it's similar to that.
There's that scene in the market when they go in,
Yeah.
and it's this endless. I don't remember how long the sequence is. Let's say a 10-minute sequence of nonstop sort of like enemy coming out of every hole in the wall, every alleyway, and this is exactly what was there. You have, think, a handful of special forces embedded into a market, and when they get the green light, all hell breaks loose, and hundreds of armed terrorists from every corner in that market sort of pick up their guns, their rockets, start whistling, calling them. We've seen these scenes personally.
Yeah, it escalates really fast. We call it a fauda also in Israel.
Within minutes, you have countless armed people, and they're just shooting everything they have in every direction. And it's almost like this slow-mo sequence where, the IDF soldiers are one after the other knocking out these terrorists. I mean, one after the other. The snipers, the machine gunners, the helicopters.
I'm sure the tanks did the best job in
probably,
this fight.
Probably.
You know,
we're both non-biased completely with, with this statement.
No, yeah, because in order for this operation to succeed in a densely populated area, you need also, tank units and infantry and other units to come and surround and take control of this area from far.
Yeah.
So you have the special forces inside, and then the normal infantry, tanks, and other units outside on the outskirts of this operation to give you, basically to back you up.
This is happening. It starts at 11 a.m. If I remember, the news breaking that day, just the sense of elation and
everybody is there. I walk in the city. Did you hear? They we released hostages. Hostages were released. It was like amazing. Yeah, the day was.
And then when it happened, you realize how much we needed that win.
Yeah.
Like on an emotional level, on a national sort of sentiment level, we needed that win. One, to show that we're able to do it. And two, just as a reminder of like how much we care about our hostages, how much our nation sort of been sitting on, sort of at the edge of the chair for months, just waiting to get our boys and girls back from the Gaza Strip. Just a sense of elation, a sense of pure bliss and joy of countless people just rejoicing in the streets. And you see the images of people in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem just celebrating.
Dancing, celebrating.
I get excited just like thinking about what a joyous moment.
No, imagine the parents of Noah and the parents of the other, hostages. It was amazing, and how happy she was to see the Israeli soldiers speaking Hebrew to her as she was doing the dishes in the house of the terrorists that kept her in the Gaza Strip. Like just that moment, it's 8 months. Imagine 8 months that you live without listening to an Israeli, with not knowing what's going to be the outcome or anything. So
I think on a morale level, this is an incredible event. Because if you think from both sides, for us, the Israelis,
it's super good.
It's a moment of victory. It's a moment where you just like you can feel
pride to be an Israeli.
A sense of pride as an Israeli, a sense of pride as someone who serves in the armed forces. And then, just as a nation, like the fact that we went to that degree of effort, to that degree of risk to bring back our men and women. And then for the other side, for the Hamas combatives, for the people supporting Hamas, what a moment of fear. Within a market where there are hundreds of armed
during
people
daylight,
in the middle of a day where they are sure no one's getting in. They're surprised. They lose their hostages. Not a single hostage is hurt in that operation. And they do everything they can, and still the hostages get out. What a blow to their morale.
Oh, definitely. Also, hopefully this is an outcome that I hope that we will see, is that those civilians that are keeping the hostages in their houses, or the neighbors of the Hamas terrorists that have hostages just next to them, hopefully they will understand that the IDF can reach them, doesn't matter where they are, in the middle of like the city, in the middle of a heavily populated neighborhood. So maybe they can think twice now whether it's worth it for them to have Israeli hostages in their houses.
Yeah.
And maybe, they will understand that and give us more information about additional hostages that are kept somewhere. In these streets.
You have to think some of that was inside information.
It must have been.
And it also was with the previous sort of rescue operations, where the level of intelligence was so great.
Good there.
It was so good that it had to have been someone who was flipped on the inside. Someone who gave accurate information on the structure of the staircases, the houses where the hostages were held, possibly even someone on the inside in the Hamas who gave up that information. I'm not saying this out of knowledge. I'm just saying, to get to that level of intelligence
makes you think,
time,
definitely.
It makes you quite sure that there are quite a few people on the inside who are, because they're afraid or because they're against Hamas, are aiding the Israelis.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any question about it. And
what shocks me about this operation is that they were kept all this time in the center of the Gaza Strip.
Yeah.
And the IDF already kind of took over control in these areas. And we were thinking that these hostages, if we find them, it will be in Rafah, because we haven't controlled it yet.
Yeah.
But we need to understand that when the military takes control of an area, it doesn't mean that it went into each and every house and every hole in the ground.
When our military.
Yes.
Not all militaries operate the same way, Yair.
What do you mean?
Other armies say, now is the time to leave your neighborhood. And
destroy the whole neighborhood.
They bring in the artillery.
Correct.
They don't bother knocking on the door.
Correct.
Army, and you're correct in saying that. Our army has sort of, they covered the terrain, but we didn't necessarily go into every house and every neighborhood and clear out the population.
Yeah.
Whatever resistance there was, we eliminated, but we didn't necessarily completely conquer every single street, alley, and neighborhood.
Yeah, we took control of, like, we have a military control over that area, but we don't have, like, presence in each house. So that's the hard part for me. Is like, so the army was holding that area, and the Hamas terrorists were still keeping the hostages inside.
I think it raises a very interesting question of what happens next. We've been in negotiations with Hamas for, since the war began. Americans are heavily involved. The Qataris are involved. Other countries are involved. What was it? A day or two after this operation, Hamas once again, completely
didn't accept another deal. Yeah.
Didn't accept. It's almost like joking to say that, because to say they didn't accept is like as if they actually considered it. The U.S. and Israel come with an offer, and the offer is whatever the parameters are.
And then they come back with a counter offer that has nothing to do with that offer.
Exactly. It's almost like
end the war now, leave us alone for another 20 years until we gain control, and we'll attack you again. Do you want to take this offer?
And we'll give no one back.
Yeah. We want to keep the hostages with us, for protection.
It's almost as if I'd say, like, Yair, I want to buy your car. I will pay you so-and-so. And your response would be, no, I will pay you to take the car. So no connection between the offers. So Hamas, even just a couple of days later, they reject yet another offer of ceasefire and hostage exchanges. And they've done this repeatedly. And you have to ask yourself how this operation is going to affect the next phase of the negotiations. Because now we've shown, while this is happening, we've sort of finished sort of the clearing out the entire
Philadelphia corridor
to Gaza. And so it's sort of putting them between a rock and a hard place, or the IDF and the Egyptians from another perspective.
The IDF and the Egyptian place,
from a different perspective, and begs the question, what is the next phase of negotiations going to look like? Because now they're sort of, we've shown we're able to pull people out. It's really been running and going on for a very long time.
We have an option to get our hostages back without a deal. Basically, we can go in and just take them back.
In part, yeah.
Yeah, that's the proof. It's hard, and I'm sure that the hostages that surround Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, are kept even in a better way, or it will be very hard to reach them.
Yeah, I don't think anyone thinks you can by force extract all the hostages, but at least some of them. At least it's leverage in a negotiation.
Yeah.
And not only that, it's a show of also the level of professionalism that the Israeli armies reached during this war, and the level of lack of professionalism on the Hamas side at this point in the war, where they're unable to stop the IDF forces even when they're really, really set on it and willing to sacrifice a huge amount of manpower in the process.
Maybe it also shows that the quality of Hamas terrorists is decreasing. So many of their high-level trained operatives that were sent to Iran and other places to get their military experience are neutralized already, or they were advanced in the ranks of Hamas,
holding them back possibly,
or they keep them for later, maybe. Yeah. And now the terrorists that we see are maybe, younger, unexperienced terrorists that just were giving weapons and they shoot at us.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said to the element of sacrifice on the Israeli side here, and that's really important. I don't know many countries, and even for us, I think it's a level of commitment that is very unique. We're willing to put the fathers and daughters of this country at personal risk to bring back the hostages. We went in, those who sort of gave the green light, Prime Minister Netanyahu, Herzi Halevi, our Chief of Staff, other generals in the army, they did so knowing that this could have ended very differently. That it could have been 20 dead on our side.
20 soldiers dead, and the hostages dead as well.
Too. Yeah. Hostages gone or dead. Mm-hmm. It could have been catastrophic. And it always is just a couple gunshots. It's a couple, inches away to end completely differently.
Yeah.
And they were willing to take that risk because we value the life of those hostages enough to put that at risk. And I thought the public response to the death of Arnon, the Special Forces commander who was killed in action, just sort of is very indicative of how the Israeli society looks at it. Just huge wave of support for this person and his family. a huge amount of positive press and stories coming out. I don't want to say idolizing, highlighting the individual that he was, highlighting the element of sacrifice in his life, highlighting the what he's given to this country in his lifetime, and setting an example of it. An example of service, an example of sacrifice.
He's a hero.
An example of humility and what a hero looks like in our society. And I think that's something it's very pretty, something very beautiful about our society, sort of putting on a pedestal in a good way someone who deserves it.
And those who sacrificed their lives for others. That's nice, Definitely compared to Hamas terrorists that do the opposite, that they, put on a pedestal the suicide bombers and stuff like that. And another thing that we learned from this operation is that during captivity, Hamas terrorists were toying and playing psychological mind games with the Israeli hostages. Because even when the IDF soldiers reached Noa, she was washing the dishes in the house there, she couldn't believe that these are really IDF soldiers. She thought that Hamas was playing mind games with her yet again in this situation. So just imagine 8 months of this evil psychological warfare that they toy with you, that they tell you that the Israelis do not want to do a hostage deal and to release you, that no one is coming for you. And after that, to actually have the soldiers come and a few hours later you're reunited with your family.
I think this whole thing gives a huge sense of hope. It gives a huge sense of reason for optimism, huge sense of pride. And I think it's also worth delaying on the international response to this. Obviously...
that's annoying,
No, for good and for worse. On the Israeli side, obviously the population was hugely just, overwhelmed with joy.
But of course, we're on one side,
And then worldwide, you see a lot of people that were celebrating the release of the hostages. Much of the mainstream media in the world celebrated the sense of...
But immediately aligned with it,
I don't know if it's a lot of the media. Some of the media focused on why were innocent, quote-unquote, innocent Palestinians killed in the release of the hostages. And then you have people from the
United Nations,
the Secretary of the European Union, Joseph Borrell. He is outraged, these are his words, of course, at the death of the civilians. How dare you kill terrorists while you're trying to release your civilians? He called it a bloodbath. Very, very terrible words, and it just shows you how there are people who, regardless of what happens...
Doesn't matter if what happens in reality.
They're hateful, and they're biased regardless of what happens. They're unable to express decency and honesty in the way they communicate. And at the same time, I think some people are just caught up in the excitement, the elation of this moment, where they sort of forgot how much they love hating on Israel for a moment, and were carried up with the excitement of this event. Because it really is, and I've seen quite a few wartime movies. This is the material. This is the material of a film.
Oh, for sure. And I think that the world also needs heroes and needs optimistic stories and stories of bravery. And I don't know, Israel is proving we're not perfect, but in this war and in this conflict, I think that we set a high standard of how to fight a war and still be humane. And basically, what's right, what's wrong. That I think that many places of the world just forgot. Everything became so gray, and there's no right and wrong. And I think that this proves it. There's terrorists are the bad guys. They kidnapped innocent Israelis, and the IDF soldiers risked their own lives in order to rescue them and bring them back home. And there is also a happy ending in this incident.
And it also highlights the question of innocent civilians or innocent bystanders.
Definitely. What is an innocent civilian?
Again, air quotes, non-combative population. So these hostages are held, and underneath them in an apartment is a family that is not a Hamas family. They're just a family of people who live in Gaza who were supportive, complicit, and knowing about this event. Not only that, people in the neighborhood knew about this.
For sure, it's impossible.
Non-Hamas people knew about this. So are they innocent? Can anyone with their right mind say that these people are innocent and uninvolved? They're 100% involved. They're 100% complicit in the acts of Hamas.
Definitely. If you bring food to the hostages that are being kept in your house, you cannot be innocent and not involved in keeping them there. Just doesn't make any sense. unless you're under the gunfire. But this is not the case in these stories. It's usually families of the terrorists or even families that know Hamas. And this is how the Middle East is built, especially in the Gaza Strip.
Yeah,
it's
tribal.
Huge chamulot. It's huge families that live in certain areas. And there is like a tribal leader of that family, and everybody is operating according to his vision, to his rule, to his leadership.
Look, I hope those people are afraid right now. I hope in the head of every chamula head, every tribe head in Gaza right now is
maybe I'm next. Maybe I'm next.
Maybe they know about our hostages and they're coming to us next.
Yeah.
I hope they're scared to hold the hostages in their homes. I hope they're scared to cooperate with Hamas. I hope they're scared to the degree of complying and aiding the IDF forces to get rid of the Hamas. Because we've talked about this. The only resolve we could have, the only result that is positive for the people of Gaza and for the people of Israel is Hamas being eliminated and driven out of the Gaza Strip completely.
Yeah.
And these events prove that. I mean, we need them gone, period. The Hamas needs to be removed from Gaza Strip at any means possible. And the people of Gaza need to have the Hamas gone, just as much as the people of Israel need them removed.
And this operation proves that the days of Hamas are numbered and the IDF can reach them wherever they are. And hopefully these leaders of the Palestinian communities will understand that and will start thinking about, okay, I want my family to survive this, so I better put my eggs with Israel and not with Hamas, because Hamas's days are over.
Yeah, I get excited telling these kind of stories. I enjoy talking about these things, and I would love to continue doing that. So I have a message for our people at home. If you enjoy this content and want to watch more about it, hear more about what's happening in this part of the world from a perspective that cares about the Bible, but also the facts and the truth, make sure to subscribe and follow our channels. And more so, and this is very important, we also need money to continue creating this content. So if you want to make a donation, even small, but big if you can afford to, make one on any platform where you find our content. It exists on our websites and the YouTube channel and anywhere you want, because we want to make a lot more of this content.
Yeah.
We want to tell these stories.
Yeah. I think that, I don't know how long have we been talking already, but I think that we have, we can talk more about this. But I'm really optimistic, and I feel pride to be an Israeli, to be an officer in the IDF, and not just because of the capabilities of our soldiers and of our troops, but also because of the spirit of this country. Because we can fight, and we fight a lot as Israelis between each other, and we don't agree very often. But when people want to come against us, I mean, we can have this amazing spirit of unity and of togetherness of his family. And I think that's kind of part of the Israeli society. We're like a big family that fight a lot, but at the end we remember that we're one family and we have one goal, and that's something that keeps us going. And on a spiritual level, I think that God gave us also this win and this opportunity to save these hostages and bring them home alive in order to give us hope. Because I think, as you said, the country really needed that. And it really encourages us to know that there is hope. So for all of you that watch this content and ask yourself, how can I pray for the peace of Jerusalem? This is how you pray. Pray for these hostages. Pray for the decision makers. Pray for the IDF soldiers. Let's pray for another operation like this. I mean, we have so many more hostages that are kept in Gaza. We can save them all, and God can do that. So let's unite in prayer for the peace of Jerusalem.
I think that's all we have for this week.
Yeah?
Yair, this was interesting. Let's do it again.
Thanks, Mati.
Yair.
And if you guys want to watch more content like this one from Israel, from Jerusalem, or from this country, from this region, please consider subscribing to this YouTube channel and also donating by going to tbn.org/Israel, or donating directly on the donate button on this YouTube channel. Thank you so much. And Mati, I think this is all for this week.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at TBN.